Nata Edwards joins us to talk about the draft. Is the center position something the Hornets should be paying attention to? And then we'll also take a look at some of the prospects in the late first round outside the lottery. That's all today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast, and that includes YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. You can visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. I'm Walker Mail. You can listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3. And there's Nata Edwards, family member coming back to the crib, producer of Ion College Basketball Podcast. And Nata, I don't know if we told you this last year, but I really appreciate you accepting that job with Ion College Basketball, because now we can just go with inside the family to go get some college analysis. And it's been very helpful to us during draft time, so we appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome for the Brandon Miller stuff because, again, I was the one that had to calm everybody down draft night, and guess who ended up being right?
Yeah, you did. Oh, look, already he's gloating. How about it's been within 1 minute. I think it's within 1 minute.
The bona fide for everyone that's calling me an idiot in the YouTube comments from last week. Okay.
Hey, were you being pessimistic again? Is that what was going on? I didn't see the YouTube comments.
Yes.
Okay.
Of course.
All right. Well, I don't know what you're going to do today, but we'll see what the YouTube comments have in store for you at the end of this show. Yeah, no Doug today. Whenever Nata comes on, apparently we just trade. All right, I can't deal with Nata. You do it. All right, I'll take the turn this time. I'll just make sure I can deal with it. So that's what we're doing today. I got to fill in for Doug to help him out with Nata on board. But let's talk about the draft. And Nata, I think one position that's interesting to discuss, especially with this team, as always, except in a different way, it's the center position. So for what? Like basically outside of Emeka Okafor, and then you get Al Jefferson.
2 years of Al Jefferson.
That's right. That's right.
And then a little bit of Cody Zeller. And I stressed
spot on.
Little bit.
Spot on.
The center position has become the defensive dark arts position at Hogwarts for the Charlotte Hornets. It's a rotating door. None of them are ever really that good enough. And then when they're all hurt and everything else like that, you bring in another poor sap to take over the position. So this year it was Nick Richards, unfortunately.
Right. Well, and it had to be Nick Richards playing because Mark Williams, while I really like him and like what he can become, of course, this is somebody now that is dealing with a back injury. And when centers are dealing with a back injury, that gets really scary. So I'll just open it up wide before we start to dwindle it down to certain prospects. How much should the Hornets be paying attention to the center position in the first round here, assuming they'll be selecting somewhere in the top 6 because, well, that's kind of where they have to be picking.
Top 6, I would say is probably like maybe the priority because I like Mark Williams. I think Mark Williams is a very good talent. I also have the problem of when you tell me a 7-footer has a back injury, that's automatically like DEFCON 1. I am not there is no other priority because at this point we've seen what happens with this team when they don't have anybody that can rebound, that don't have anyone that can defend the rim. This becomes a very, very, very subpar, very, very average team. Unfortunately, and I say this fortunately, you have 2 guys at the top this year, Donovan Clingan and Alex Sarr, that can fill that role of a Mark Williams at the expense of maybe some dodgy, at best, wing prospects. So I think if you're talking about drafting the safest position in this draft this year with a whole bunch of landmines, it's probably at the center position.
Yeah.
And that's why you do it.
Yeah, man. It feels like you are going the safe route, which is okay. Oftentimes people use safe as a bad thing, and it's actually a pretty good thing in the draft, but you obviously don't shoot for the stars with some of these guys, or maybe you're shooting for the SARs, not the stars. Maybe that's something.
No, you're absolutely shooting for the SARs. No, you're absolutely shooting for the SARs. But I would also point out, anyone that's bashing the safe route hasn't watched the Charlotte Hornets in the last 24 months. I'm sorry.
Well,
the safe route is probably the best route to go because there have been a whole bunch of swings and a whole bunch of misses.
The idea is that Mark Williams, if you try to maximize this as much as possible, the idea would be Mark Williams is healthy. He's ready to go next year. You try to add your defensive wing like Stephon Castle, who has been mocked to them a lot. You have whoever, Reed Shepherd, who can shoot the lights out of the basketball. Same thing with Rob Dillingham. I know your thoughts on him. But that would be the idea of trying to maximize the talent that you have because you're rolling with Mark Williams, who's already on the roster. But if we are looking at the center position, you're right. Like, you can't ignore it. And if now you're starting to see Sarr as the guy going first more often than not, I wonder if I'll just ask you, Nata, are you going away from Sarr if he's there for you, if you have the second pick, the first pick, whatever, and he's still on the board? At that point, is that something where you're just going to go ahead and take him? Or is there an argument to be made for you to where, like, okay, we don't have to take Sarr. We can take one of these other guys that we've talked about quite a bit?
Honestly, I would tell you that if it's not Sarr, it's got to be Clingan. And here's my hot take that I kind of shared with you. I'm not sure there's a big gap between Sarr and Clingan, especially when we start talking about the defense. We're talking about with Donovan Clingan, a guy that was the anchor for the fourth adjusted defense in the country last year, won a whole bunch of games and a lot of not close games. And the only games that they really lost last year were the games where either Clingan was hurt and or was just really limited, or it was one random night in Omaha, Nebraska, basically. So I'm telling you that this guy can be the anchor to your defense. He's a little bit more advanced than a Mark Williams was at this point in his career. And I would also point out, anyone that's going to probably bring up, well, Edey gave him 35. Edey gave him 35 one-on-one. But also when you start looking at what Clingan does in the pick and roll in terms of laterally, you're talking about a dude with an 8-foot wingspan that can potentially contain guards on the pick and roll. How many centers can actually do that? And then I would add, how many of those guys have actually played for the Charlotte Hornets? The answer would probably be 0 at this point for both. So when I tell you that Sarr and Clingan are probably 1A, 1B on that board, it's because what they can do from a defensive perspective can unlock so much in terms of maybe being able to keep a Miles Bridges, again, a Brandon Miller not necessarily having to gamble and do a whole bunch of other things. And then if Cody Martin comes back, and I stress if, you're talking about guys that are going to be able to gamble more. You're going to be able to be a little bit more in their shorts on the defensive end. So if you're telling me centers got to be the priority, especially if you're trying to prioritize defense at this point.
All right, let's continue that conversation on the other side of the break. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
We continue to talk about the center position and take a look at some of the other prospects in the late first round. All still to come. Locked On Hornets. This episode is brought to you by DoorDash. This Mother's Day, get something thoughtful for mom on DoorDash, and you can surprise her from wherever you are with fresh bouquets, the latest tech, gift cards, self-care treats, and more to make her day that much better. You can shop with savings that would make her proud with a Dash Pass membership, and you'll save $0 delivery fee and reduce service fees on eligible orders from Dash Pass merchants that met the minimum subtotal. Other fees apply, terms apply. But the Dash Pass, I have the Dash Pass, by the way. I have that. So I might just get my mom that as well. Thank you for the advice, DoorDash. Get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place and get 50% off your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 plus on your next flour, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Let's continue the center conversation just for a moment, because you mentioned, I think you're right, anybody that would not like Clingan would point to the championship game where Zach Edey had 35. But also, if you'll remember, a lot of that was early where Edey was eaten, and then eventually Clingan really bothered him. There were a lot of, I don't know about bunnies, but it made it really tough, Clingan did, on Edey to get to that 35. And if you listen to Coach Hurley, I mean, the entire game plan was to just let him take 40 shots and not let everybody else get going. And that's exactly what happened. Like, Purdue took, 2 3-point field goals the entire game? Yep. It was ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous. And that was the game plan. So you're not going to be dealing with a lot of Zach Edeys in this world. Plus, and even if you're going with, well, okay, he'll have to deal with Joel Embiid. He'll have to deal with Nikola Jokic. Right. He actually has the mobility and size more than a lot of other prospects out there. I'm kind of with you on Clingan. I like him. I think for me, I would rather go one of these wings or maybe some backcourt help. But I'm not going to be angry at the Clingan stuff, because if you do get Clingan in I guess it'd be the first 6 picks or something like that, then you do have 2 really talented young centers on your roster. And maybe somebody would be willing to give you some trade value for Mark Williams, and because those 2 guys can't play on the floor at the same time, obviously. So if you wanted to trade Mark or just keep both guys as depth, I don't know. And then you figure out, okay, like I wonder if you do this Clint Capella and Yeka Kongwu type stuff where
probably,
and you have a starter, you feel good about him, you have somebody come off of the bench, and then maybe you do the Jokic Nurkic type thing where you send Nurkic out, and then you get some value in return, and then you pick who is the best of the 2. Like, so there is a path there. We've seen a couple of these before. That's why I would be open to it. I still think I would go a different direction, but if they did get Clingan, you still have some options there, even with Mark Williams on the roster.
The only thing is, a lot of my go get Clingan and figure it out is in the fact that I'm not sure about a lot of these wings.
Yeah.
A lot of people bring up Ron Holland. Ron Holland is good, but you have to remember the turnovers. There's, again, the Buzelis talk. I like him. Where does he play? And is he really a 3 or a 4 at the next level right now? And are we talking about a guy that probably needs at least another year or 2 in the strength training program to be an effective player? There's a lot of these wings. And then we can get into the Dillingham stuff, but at the same point, this league is getting longer and stronger and more skilled. And at maybe 6'3", maybe, we're talking about a guy that may or may not interfere with one of your 2 best players in terms of playing. So there's a lot of this that, like, there is no right answer to this. So I understand why anyone wants to push back on me on the center thing. But if we're talking about the most solid prospect, the one that's probably going to give you the most bang for your buck, and you're not necessarily going to have to worry about anything, it's probably Donovan Clingan at this point.
What do you think about all the UConn guys like Caravan and Castle? What do you think about them?
To me, Castle's the perfect guy for the Charlotte Hornets. It's just I'm not sure he's actually going to be there, because I think there's going to be a lot of workouts, a lot of interviews. And we talk about Donovan Clingan probably being the most solid guy in the top 6. Stephon Castle's probably right there with him, because you know what he can do. Alex Caravan is probably my favorite of the guys that you're going to be able to draft anywhere from 20 to 35. Because he knows what he's coachable, he can play defense, and he can shoot. There are a lot of guys when we talk about the Charlotte Hornets that can't do 2 out of the 3. He can do all 3. Yeah. I like him. We talk about Tristan Newton. Tristan Newton's another one where if you're not sure about Micic, or you want to move off Micic for another salary, bring somebody else in, Tristan Newton's not necessarily a bad guy to have in the 30s, because I think he's going to be a solid role player for a very, very long time. Very much in the Marcus Sasser role. Then you have Cam Spencer, who might be my favorite shooter in this draft. And it's like Cam Spencer is just the right amount of asshole to where he belongs on this roster.
Yeah.
So I truly believe that he has a spot in the league. He's not somebody you're going to draft in the first 45. But at the same point, if you bring him in on a 2-way contract and he plays for the Greensboro Swarm, I guarantee you he'll be a rotation player in 18 months.
So it sounds like, yeah, you're aboard the center train. As Doug put it before we hopped on, you are driving the SAR car a little bit, or Clingan, yeah. But Clingan is also there because you don't think there's that much of a distance, and you like Castle. And Castle has been the one that's been mocked to them the most, man. I mean, if he's there, I wonder if you just grab the defensive guy that doesn't have like an ugly shot. It just didn't go in. At least
it's workable.
Yeah,
it looks
workable.
And also, everybody's worried about the shot. The shot improved over the season. Like, let's not ignore that portion of that. Like, that I can't remember. There was the Final Four game again where he was in the Final Four. They dared him to shoot. What did he do? He just kept hitting jumper after jumper after jumper.
And he knocked down a jumper in the championship game too, right? I think he knocked a three in the championship.
I'm not worried about the jumper. He's so again, and this will bring you back because again, me and you had this conversation about LaMelo Ball, and I'm not trying to say he's a LaMelo Ball skilled player, but what I am saying is he does enough right to where I'm not worried about the jump shot as much. He defends at an excellent level. He's got the basketball IQ at a high level. He's very, very coachable because if not, he wouldn't be playing for Danny Hurley. So this guy is probably like, it's underwhelming from somewhat of an athletic perspective, but for everything that he does, you can't tell me he doesn't fit the Charlotte Hornets roster perfectly at this point.
No, I agreed. I think Castle would be my leader in the clubhouse right now as long as he's there. If we go outside the lottery, Nata, we got to talk about my guy. You know who that
Harrison
is.
Ingram.
I love him. I just love him. And look, so, and perhaps this is the confirmation bias. I will fully, raise my hand on the confirmation bias thing here because I love the transfer when I saw that Hubert Davis got him in the portal. Highly touted guy coming out of high school. And just wasn't hitting enough shots at Stanford, but also you could tell really smart ball player, excellent passer, fireballs in the corner, nice vision, good rebounder. I was like, okay, if the shot can just come around a little bit, then he's going to be a home run. And man, he was a home run for that North Carolina roster. I don't think the defense is going anywhere. No, I don't think the rebounding is going anywhere. Same thing with the vision. My question is the 2-point percentage finishing at the rim, little dicey for him. But the other thing is the shooting an outlier? Like, it was on good volume, Nata. He shot, what was it, like 4 attempts per game? Yeah. He shot 38% on good volume. The free throw percentage wasn't good. It's never been good. He didn't shoot well from 3 at Stanford. So we're going off of one really good shooting season for him. Is that enough? That's the question. But the other question is, does it matter if you're talking about drafting him late in the first round, to which I don't think it does.
Not in this draft. If you're telling me Alex Caravan or Harrison Ingram, I'm probably going Caravan just by a hair. But he's one of those guys that's going to be 6'8", 6'9", very switchy, very, again, lengthy. We're talking about a league that is basically telling you have to be 6'5" to about 6'11" with decent wingspan, and you have to be able to shoot. And if you can do all that, there's a spot for you in this league. If the jumper is going to be the thing that holds him back, then I get it. But he's going to get drafted in the first 35 picks, especially of this draft. I believe in the defense. I believe in the tools. Like, he's a guy that can do multiple things and that can only bolster your roster. The question only becomes if he does well enough in the workouts. If he does well with the jumper, he's going to be a first rounder. If not, he's going to be a second rounder. But he's in that range where I'm not sure it's going to matter. He's a rotation player. I truly believe in what he can do.
Yeah. All right. Let's continue that conversation and bring in more JJ Redick conversation, shall we? Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast. We know about some of your favorite prospects and that late lottery to late first round, but what are we going to trade back with the Charlotte Hornets? Is that an option that we like? And then we'll also get to more of the coaching convo coming up next. Locked On Hornets. This episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying, flag on the play. You already talked about that, Walker, but there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get, too. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games as well, like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. Still got to look up what that is. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench. Go download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. One more segment to go. Locked On Hornets. Before we get into JJ Redick, Charles Lee discussion here, Nata, I did want to ask you, do you like the idea of the Hornets trading back in this selection process, or would you rather just stay home wherever they get their pick, whether it be, I mean, they could get the first round or the first overall pick. Like, that's entirely possible here.
That is.
So if that's the case, does that change something for you compared to if you're picking fourth? What are your thoughts there?
Honestly, tell me what's available. You telling me that if it's Brandon Ingram that comes in some sort of deal like that, where you absorb some salary, take him on, and trade back? Okay, I understand. But there's got to be like a limit to what they do. I do believe that this team's bereft of talent. I do believe that this team needs a bunch of older guys that know what they're doing. But at the same point, it's got to come at a cost. And as someone that thinks that there's going to be a lot of roster chaos when the draft hits, it all depends on the return. If you're telling me they go back to 4, they still pick up a guy, I'm good with that. I do think that the level of talent in this draft drops significantly after 7. So if you're telling me that you still want to get a rotation guy, you want to get a high rotation potential star, you're most likely probably going to get it in that 1 to 7 range. But if you're telling me that they're doing this and they're bringing in a solid veteran, that one that can change the entire roster composition, I'm absolutely doing it. Again, just give me the right guy. Brandon Ingram probably works best in this scenario.
Do you have Ron Holland and Dalton Knecht outside that 7?
I have Holland at the back end of that 7. Dalton Knecht is an interesting name because I think he can shoot, but I do worry that he's high-end Joe Harris. That is a really good player, but at the same point, that's a guy that does come in with a few limitations, and how well does he actually defend? That is, and granted, Tennessee was a great team defensively. I do have questions about what Dalton Knecht can be and the ceiling on that, but he can be a high-end rotation guy possibly as well.
Did you just do same race comparison? Is that what you just did with high-end Joe Harris? Is that what happened?
Well, it's that, but I
don't disagree, by the way. We always look for the opposite. That's what we do. So now, even if it's false, now we always try to look for the opposite. But that's what I do as well. So yeah, Joe Harris, that's your high-end comp. It does seem right to me.
Like Joe Harris, it's either Joe Harris or more consistent Tobias Harris.
Okay,
but without the length. But also, I say that, and that's probably without the length. Like Knecht is 6'7", 6'8". Tobias Harris is closer to 6'9", 6'10".
Yeah.
But if you're telling me he's a little bit more consistent scorer, he's a guy that can torture you on a short corner shot. Yeah, I kind of like Dalton Knecht, but it's also at the risk of your defense. But I will say this: I am higher on Knecht than I am on Reed Sheppard. I don't think Reed Sheppard belongs on this. I think he's one of those guys that probably needs to be drafted outside the top 10. I do have questions about what he can actually be.
Okay, and he probably won't, by the way, which is interesting. So that's the guy you're fading in all of this more so than the other players.
Him and Bezelis.
Okay,
I have questions about that. I think Ron Holland can be good. I think Ron Holland is also a guy that needs significant coaching, and I think he's a guy that's going to have to spend some time if you're trying to win in the G League to start his career.
Let's go to the coaching combo. You and I have not had the JJ Redick v. Charles Lee conversation yet. It's still pretty new, but I will tell you, it's interesting to see yesterday, Nata, all these clips from JJ Redick just doing a media tour. The guy is hot right now. He is so hot right now. Big pod with Shaq, joining Ryan Clark on the pivot. We see him out there on playoff courts, hanging out with Luka Doncic, where Luka and the Mavericks are saying, the Charlotte Hornets. He is everywhere. And it seems like a lot of fans want him to be the head coach. Does it feel like it's solely because he's everywhere and he has a podcast and he's a pretty popular guy? And is that enough to get him in the door where maybe he figures it out after that? What are your JJ Redick thoughts, Nata?
JJ Redick is a smart guy. Like, let me just establish this now.
Mm-hmm.
I like JJ Redick. I like his acumen. I like the fact that he is trying to add like the necessary weeds to the diet of the average basketball fan, like the basketball knowledge. He's trying to make everybody smarter. I get that, and I appreciate that. Here's my problem. I don't think that just because you are a smart guy on TV doesn't necessarily mean you get to skip the line in terms of being a coach. We have not seen this work in any aspect. People are going to bring up Steve Kerr, but are going to ignore the experience part that Steve Kerr had as a general manager. He understood how the back of house works. Unfortunately for JJ Redick, he does not understand how the back of house works. If he doesn't understand that, then how can you be an effective communicator? How can you be an effective coach? And more importantly, if you're telling me that JJ Redick is the only guy that is willing to take this job, it says a whole lot more about the reputation of this Hornets franchise. And then more importantly, if the only guy you can get is a guy with very little bench experience, how are you going to develop these kids when the coaches that are really good at developing aren't going to be bringing in anybody else? They're not going to want to touch this job of JJ Redick. They're all going to see it as a gimmick. And for a team with a reputation in the gutter like the Charlotte Hornets do, you cannot afford to make unserious hires at this point.
So, yeah, and there's an article on the Charlotte Observer written by Rod Boone talking about JJ Redick's candidacy and how serious it is and the possibility that he would become the Charlotte Hornets head coach. And I think we've all accepted that's very serious. Like, there's a very real possibility of this happening. I don't know if we focus too much, Nata, on the convo about coaches not wanting this job, and if that's the case for everybody else, then is JJ Redick just really your only feasible last option? So I wonder about the timing on this too.
Yeah,
I was talking to somebody.
The timing is weird.
Yeah, so I was talking to somebody yesterday. If we were trying to figure out when they would announce the hire, it feels like next week, maybe. But that's not from anybody. That's not from anything.
It's got to be soon, though.
That's right? What I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. If it's this week, then I would think it's JJ. If it's next week, then it might be Charles Lee after this first round series with Boston. Like, I don't know. It's not like you can wait too much longer on this Charles Lee stuff. And I do wonder, is this job really that unattractive? And is this organization that low thought of?
Yes.
That Charles Lee doesn't want this job. And that's unfortunate, like, because I do think there are some attractive pieces here, and it is a new regime. Like, I guess they're just going to have to show the world that they can actually do this thing before they hire the first choice that they have as a head coach, because they can't do anything now. It's a new GM and Jeff Peterson, new owners and Plotkin and Schnall. They did what they could at the trade deadline, which was operate pretty well. Yeah. They have Brandon Miller. The health thing is definitely scary, but if those guys are healthy, then you feel decent about the 60% out there on the starting in the starting lineup with Melo, Brandon, and Mark. I hope that it's not that unattractive, but it certainly feels like this might be their reputation.
It's the reputation, and unfortunately for Jeff Peterson, it's something out of his control, but it's something you absolutely knew about taking this job.
Yeah.
Now, was this his eyes were too big for his stomach? Again, his connections with Charles Lee and other guys, maybe he thought they were stronger than they actually were. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate, but at the same point, like, this job, this team has a fairly bad reputation. There's not enough separation between the Jordan regime, unfortunately, and the Plotkin and Schnall regime. People are going to have to see improve and show sustainable, tangible growth. And unfortunately, you're not going to be able to do that in a year. It's kind of why I believe the reports about Plotkin and Schnall really just being willing and able to bring back Steve Clifford, because I think they knew that that this job was going to be a tough sell in the moment. For right now, I understand, but at the same point, it's why I don't think you can double down and be like, let's go take the big swing and let's go get JJ Redick. I don't think that's something that you can do, because I think this is a scenario where you cannot skip steps. You have to take every cautious step. You got to be prepared, and you got to be understanding that, no matter who we hire, this may be a 32-win team next year, and that's going to have to be okay. But at the same point, like, understand that as long as you take the proper steps to grow and to basically drag this franchise's reputation out of the gutter, like, this is going to be a long process. This is not going to be a quick fix. And anyone that thinks this is going to be a quick fix is going to be solely mistaken.
Well, and so I guess we can end on this. I don't know for sure about Charles Lee getting a second interview with the Hornets. I'm not sure if that's the case. To me, if there wasn't a second interview, I would think that's on Charles Lee's behalf, not on the Hornets, not reaching out. I would say it's Charles Lee not wanting it. If there's a second interview between the two parties, then I really hope we don't get another Kenny Atkinson situation in which you're showing all this interest only to back out. Maybe you back out a little earlier before, you get the job. Maybe you back out, but it would still be very Kenny Atkinson-like. So Nata, I wonder if it comes down between like not begging, but wanting Charles Lee to be the head coach and him just being real lukewarm on accepting it. Whereas maybe JJ Redick just wants to get into the game so bad, and this is his path, and it doesn't matter if it's the Hornets despite their reputation, so he's willing to take it. If you're the Hornets, would you roll with JJ Redick despite not having any coaching experience, but he's the guy that wants this job, not just any, but maybe this job? Or would you still just try to hold out hope that Charles Lee would accept it, even if he's lukewarm? I don't know. I kind of like being an assistant for a championship contending team. I'd like to try my chances at getting another head coaching job with some of these West Coast squads.
Yep.
That's what I'm saying. So what would you rather do? Lock in Lee before he gets a job that he really likes, or just go ahead and give JJ Redick the job he really likes if that's the case?
You go and lock in Charles Lee. That's not even a question at this point. Quite honestly, if you do not lock in Charles Lee, then you have to go find yourself a qualified assistant, because I believe that a qualified assistant is going to garner more respect than JJ Redick coming into that building. You have to go get yourself a qualified coach. You have to run a serious operation, because if you hire JJ Redick, you are not going to be perceived as serious, and that's going to matter around the league more than people want to admit. I like JJ Redick. If he had any sort of coaching or GM experience, I would completely understand hiring him. But for right now, you can't hire him, because I'm not sure anyone's going to take you seriously, least of all the guys in the locker room that have to be under his purview. So I do believe that this is one of those situations. If you have a Charles Lee, you put something on paper, you lock it down, and you hire him.
All right, Nata. Last thing, I want to know what did you just drop an AirPod? Yeah,
I just dropped an AirPod. Yeah,
that was the mic drop. I didn't know if a bee got you or what that was.
No, that was the AirPod that quite literally slipped out of my ear.
I was gonna ask before we get out of here, what's the latest record you added to your collection? Latest vinyl, my vinyl brother that you are. What's the latest one you purchased?
It's the Chronic. I bought the Chronic, and I got the Police, Ghost in the Machine.
Oh, okay.
Also, I have to ask, as someone that had to prep a show, what was it like to have Euphoria drop 15 minutes before the show prep?
I didn't listen to it. I didn't listen to it right as it dropped. Wes did immediately. He's not caring about that. He would have postponed the show if he could. He would have said, "Hey, let's go ahead and just roll with this at 12:06 with this 6-minute long song." Maybe we can give Euphoria takes next time you join, and we can digest it a little bit more. This is a song you probably need to listen to 10 times, but even the first 5, you're able to garner some opinions. My thing was, if I could go to FanDuel right now, or if I could have gone to FanDuel before the Kendrick Lamar disc dropped, and if FanDuel had a prop on how long the song was going to be, I would have hammered the over. The one thing I was for sure about was that Kendrick was not going to come at Drake with this 2-minute, 3-minute song to just unload and then be done. No, this was always going to be at least a 6-minute song. I'm actually surprised. It's actually not. I'm not kidding. It's actually on the lower end of the song length that I thought it would be.
Did you hear the rumor about it?
I did. I heard that there's a 19-minute version, and that's the Kendrick Lamar that I would have bet on. But I would have hammered the over on 6 and only barely beat it, but I knew it wasn't about to be some 3-minute diss. That is not how Kendrick cooks. Not at all.
Let me put it this way. I am a fairly angry person at times. I do not hold nearly as much anger as one Kendrick Lamar does for that man, Aubrey Graham.
He was ready for it.
That man came with receipts. That man used a Teddy Pendergrass sample.
Oh, and it was
That's
great
where we
too.
are.
vibing.
That's
We
where-
were going into that song vibing before he dropped the hammer. It was a beautiful thing. All right, that's Nata Edwards. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Nata the Scribe and go check out his excellent college basketball podcast. It's called the Ion College Basketball Podcast with Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander. I'm Walker Mail. Listen to me on Sports Radio 92.7 WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Thanks again to Nata. Thanks again to you guys for making us your first listen. Catch us anywhere you get your pods, including YouTube. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow.